welcome one and all to June's Author Nook. I am Jordan H. Bartlett, author of Contest of Queens, Queen's Catacombs, and the upcoming March 2025 release, Queendom Come, and I am joined today by the one and only wonderful Abigail Miles. Welcome, Abigail.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so excited to talk about your debut novel, which is called The Building That Wasn't. It's coming out July 16th of this year, so that is next month. Please mark your calendars. It is an absolute triumph, and we're going to get stuck into unraveling narratives and doublethink. But before we get too deep into that, please, Abigail, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your novel?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Abigail Miles, and The Building That Wasn't is my debut novel. I was born in North Carolina. I went to school at Appalachian State University, where I majored in creative writing and also mathematics, which is fun. And then I moved up north shortly after that. So I live in the Boston area now. Love it. New England is such a wonderful area. I am a reader and a writer, of course, but beyond that, I am a person who loves tea and loves puzzles, loves weird TV, and loves twisty stories like my own. The Building That Wasn't, like I said, is my first novel. It comes out next month. It is a science fiction book at its core, but it's also a bit of a genre bender. So there's some mystery thriller elements in there. I've been told there's some horror aspects as well, which I did not think when I was writing it, but I'm honestly kind of thrilled because I wanted to write a weird book, and Scary Weird is certainly a brand I'm happy to jump on board with. So it's, in a nutshell, I guess, about a young woman named Beverly Tertium who is in her mid early 20s and trying to navigate life a little bit, figure out what she wants to do. But in the midst of all of that, while she's been living at home, her dad dies towards the beginning of the book. So, not a spoiler. And after he dies, she feels very adrift, not really sure what she wants to do with her life or what comes next for her. And she is approached by a man one day who claims to be her grandfather, who she has never met, which is very strange in itself. And then he invites her to a building that she has never heard of, which is even more strange. And when she decides to go, she finds all kinds of weird things in this building. She starts to have all of these experiences of deja vu and feeling like she's already been here before and already lived through all of these things, already met these people and had these conversations, and none of it really makes sense. She's also questioning all the people who seem to be there. There are a bunch of elderly residents who seem to be living in apartments throughout the building, but there definitely appears to be more than meets the eye. It doesn't seem like it's just a normal nursing home or apartment building or anything like that. And so Everly really sets out to try and uncover the mystery of what this building is and who the people inside are and how it all is connected to her and her family and her family's history. So kind of unravels from there in ways that I'm not going to reveal or spoil here.
And it is such a wild ride. And I love hearing that you have a history in creative writing and mathematics because it really is a
Yeah.
left brain, right brain kind of book. Like as I was reading it, I'm like, I feel like I'm in the Matrix, but like if the Matrix were full of metaphors. And so it's
Mm.
really this beautiful merging of the two kind of logic and emotion. It's wonderfully crafted. What inspired you to write a novel like this?
Yes. So I think my answer is a bit of a cliche, but it is the answer. So I'm sharing it anyway. It was inspired by a dream, which I think a lot of writers say, but it's very true in this case. There's not really another answer. So years ago, before I started writing it, obviously, I woke up from a dream that was one of those super visceral, real feeling ones where you wake up and you feel like you just watched a movie. And I could recount so much from the dream in that morning. And so I wrote down everything I could remember because it was such a wild dream. And it felt so real in the midst of it and so interesting. Like I remember waking up and wanting to know where the dream went from there, and being disappointed that I couldn't. And I just was so fascinated by this story that my subconscious had created in my brain. But of course, as is true in most dreams, the dream logic doesn't really carry over into the real world very well. So I set about trying to figure out a way where I could write a story around this dream that made sense in a way that people in the real world could understand. But that still retained the weird aspects of the dream, like really specific components of this dream that I'm really happy made its way all the way from there into the final product, but that wouldn't have been possible in real life. So I think starting with that dream as my core idea basis, and then kind of over the years figuring out how do I structure a book that still feels kind of dream-like and still kind of is reminiscent of this dream that took place in a building that was strange, full of strange people, about a young woman who finds it and encounters a lot of people that are maybe connected to her in certain ways, or maybe are just beyond the scope of what reality should say is possible. And so from that flirt, like came this sci-fi story as a way to kind of compensate for dream logic. Yeah, and from there it was just a matter of kind of restructuring over and over again to figure out how to make it make the most sense. But yeah, like I said, still sort of feel dreamlike in a certain way. So that was kind of the initial conception.
I love that. And it really, now that you say that, it really does have a dreamlike feel to it. And as the reader, you're constantly, it's almost like a down the rabbit hole, I'm now in Wonderland feeling,
Mhm.
because everyone else knows what's going on. And you, as the reader, are following Everly, who is just as clueless as we are in this. I'm now having to put one and one together and somehow come out with three, because everyone else says that one plus one is three in this world. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got such a cool etherealness about it. And what was your writing process? Because there's a lot of elements of mystery, and we've got time skip flashes, and we've got that double think where two realities seem to be the same and true, but different and at the same
Mhm.
time. Uh, how did you manage to kind of trickle that all into a cohesive piece with your writing process?
Ooh, great question. Well, I think generally when people start with the writing process question, they have the plotter versus pantser question. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle with that. The, people throw out the term plantser, so sure. I am a rewriter. I think that my writing process in this, and generally speaking, first drafts are my weakest point. So I tried very much to just focus on a few really specific elements that I knew I wanted in the story in that first draft, but as a whole, it was not very good. And I am significantly better, I think, at revision, or I enjoy it significantly more. And so I think I am not an outliner, and I'm not very good at planning out a story in its entirety at the beginning, especially a story like this that is pretty complicated by the end. But I am pretty good at writing out something that has a foundation and then having a lot of fun brainstorming, so that's where I think the pseudo planning comes in. I have a lot of very long, very messy brainstorming documents that were formed in the midst of crafting this book, that were mostly ideas or thoughts that would strike me in the middle of writing a draft that I didn't wanna go back and incorporate all the way through what I'd already written, so I would finish it out, and then look over these ideas that I had in the middle and then plot out, "Okay, how can I reincorporate this into a rewrite of the book? How can I reshape the structure of it to kind of fit around this?" And in a way, I think rewriting the book, I rewrote it a lot of times before it got to the end result. But I genuinely think that rewriting it so many times helped to feel more balanced in how the different threads, I guess, and the different angles and clues and whatever hints that are sprinkled throughout it balance themselves out better and felt more evenly spread throughout it, because by the time I was in like a sixth or seventh rewrite of the story, I knew where it was going. I knew who the characters were. I knew what the pieces were. So it was really easy to say when rewriting towards the beginning, like, oh, this would be a great place to plop this character in as a nice foreshadowing for something that I know is coming later on, or things like that that layer on top of themselves as I rewrote the story over and over again. So yeah, my writing process was definitely not figure everything out before I start and craft it from there. It was very much figure things out as I go along, but then go back and reincorporate things and then kind of smooth it over to make sure it all blends together well by the end.
Oh, I love that. And that is such good advice, because not everyone can see the whole story at the beginning. I know I'm one of those writers too, where even if I write a full outline and I sit down and I'm like, okay, I want this to be the start, this to be the middle, this to be the end, because the as you write, things change and you get new ideas, or you have a dream, or you are daydreaming
Mhm.
out the window and you think, oh, that would be really cool to add. Far better to be open to that shifting kind of quantum state of the first draft and then
Mhm.
really solidify a nice final draft, however many years and however many revisions later.
Yes.
But then you've like lived the story and you've tweaked it all the in all the right places. So
It was I mean, like I said, I genuinely enjoy revisions significantly more than the first draft process, so I had a lot of fun rewriting this book over and over again and finding different weird ways to change it or, like, different stylistic things to try out and see, like, how far can I press this before it's not good anymore, where it's just, like, kind of unreadable or intolerable, and then dial it back a little bit, and then maybe edge it back up or interchange weird chapters in the middle of I don't know, normal plot chapters. So I did have a lot of fun changing this book over the years.
very cool. And then what was your favorite character arc, subplot, kind of element to your story that you got to tweak and write?
Yeah, it's a great question. Probably the character of Michael and his what he contributes to the story. So Michael is a young boy. I think he's 8 or 9. I can't remember specifically what I landed on for him. He bounced around in age, honestly. But he's a young boy who lives in this building, and he's lived in the building his whole life. And he was one of those core elements that I started off knowing I wanted his character to be a part of this book, and, like, he stuck around from the very beginning through to the end, and I just had so much fun playing around with his backstory and what his presence in the building means for the building and, like, who he is, what his character is. I just loved he's not a hugely main character, meaning he's not on the page the most. He's definitely not the most spoken character in the book, but I still think that he is one of the most central characters, even though he's not on the page very much. And his chapters, there are a couple that are focused on him, and those were some of my favorites to write and to reread. I just loved all of his chapters, and I loved just incorporating different things around his arc into the book as a whole. So I think I left a lot up to interpretation around Michael and his connections to the building and to other people. Some things are specifically revealed or told, but there's a lot of things that are really left up to interpretation, which I also liked and did intentionally so readers can, you know, think what they want about him. But I loved him. He's one of my favorite characters too that I wrote in this book.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, Michael is such a ray of sunshine. I'm thinking back, I think honestly, in your character's description, you said a boy of about 8 or 9. So
There you go.
yes. But he's such a ray of sunshine, and he's just, I think it's his innocence because the more we delve into this building and the more you kind of reveal to the reader is going on, the darker it gets. It really feels like a slow descent into something
Mhm.
terrifying. And Michael is just this pure little soul who
Yeah.
is sometimes he gets in a bit of a trance and he's trying to walk in a way that no one else walks. And it's like, oh, whoops, did I do it again? Like he's just, he's this uncorruptible pureness in your story. He's wonderful.
Yeah. And I really liked shaping him that way. I feel like a lot of children characters are used in fiction in creepy ways, and I really specifically was trying to make him not a creepy character. But I also like the idea of this character who has been in this not happy environment for his entire life, but still manages to have a joyful outlook on life, which I thought was a really interesting juxtaposition to play around with.
Yeah, he really is like the silver lining in that storm cloud.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give writers wanting to write a novel with such a complex and layered narrative?
I think sort of going back to talking about my own writing process, and I know that every writer is different, and so what works for them may be different from what works for me. But I do think that finding a foundation or a really solid starting place, like the elements that you know you want to be in your book or story, and just starting with that initial layer of what those are, and then building from there is probably the best advice I would give rather than trying to do all of the layering at once, which can get twisted in your head and confusing or can lead to a lot of plot holes and things like that. I think really taking your time, slowing down, and being okay with crafting a really strong foundation and then adding back in the different threads and layers and like subplots and things like that on top of that foundational layer worked for me. So I hope that it would work for others too.
And I think that's such a good piece of advice because in this, and we're going to get deep here, in this world where it's all about content creation at the moment, people are putting out new things all the time. And a lot of writers, I think, are feeling that pressure to kind of churn out a book every year or
Mhm.
every 2 years to stay relevant or to give their readers something else to do when they binge read their book in 2 days, what took 5 years to write. So I think it's really good advice that taking that time and being really intentional and letting yourself have non-writing days where you're just thinking about your book creates a good book.
Absolutely. And I do think there are some genres that are maybe easier to write quickly, or maybe that you can write in just 1 or 2 drafts without needing as much layering, but I think that anything sort of mystery related, thriller related, sci-fi, I don't know, with more world building involved is definitely something to slow down on to make sure all the pieces are fitting together well.
Yeah. And that the thing that you're trying to say is being said eloquently or or at least just getting out
Yes.
there.
Yes, very much so. So many different things to think about when you're writing.
Yes, yeah. And what is something that you included in your novel that you really geek out over?
Okay. When I was thinking about this question, I was trying to think of something specific, and what came to mind most clearly for me is my name for my building. So the name of the building in the book is the Eschatologic, which is, I know, a long and slightly complicated name for a building. I don't actually expect most readers to internalize that name. That's why I mostly in the book just refer to it as the building because I know it's a long name. But when I was first starting off and writing this book and drafting it years ago, I knew that the building was going to be a very central component to the book, and so I knew that the name of it was going to be important to me, at least, if not to readers. And so I wanted it to be something with meaning, something that fit what I had in mind for the building itself and for the book as a whole. And so I didn't give it a name initially. It was just called The Building. And then I landed on its name after being inspired by a YouTube video. So I'm a big fan of the Vlogbrothers YouTube channel, which is Hank and John Green's YouTube channel. And years ago, I guess around the time when I was writing the first draft, there was some video, and I'm going to be very much paraphrasing these, but there was some video where Hank Green and his was addressing John Green and asking him, he's like, John, there's some word that you use that's like the study of death or something. And he was like, I can't remember what the word is. What is it? And then in the next video, John follows up by saying, oh, I know what you're talking about. The word is eschatology. And I just remember watching that video and going, that's a very interesting word that I have never heard of. And the study of death sounds so fascinating that there could be a study of such a thing. And so I looked it up. And I'm going to read the definition from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. It says that eschatology is a belief concerning death, the end of the world, or the ultimate destiny of humankind, which I thought was such an interesting thing to have a word about, and also fits very much thematically with a lot of what I wanted to shape my story around. I do think a lot of the ultimate themes of the book as a whole are, again, kind of up for reader interpretation. I don't want to say this is what the book is about specifically in a lot of ways, but there are definitely like overlapping themes that I think fits in with that definition. And so I really latched onto that word and thought, how can I incorporate this? So I just morphed it a bit. It went from eschatology to eschatologic. So that's where the name of the building came from for anyone who is curious.
I love that so much, and I am such a fan of word of the days. So thank you for giving me today's.
There you go. Yes.
Also, thank you for saying it out loud because whenever my brain reads a word that's like just not a normal word and it's longer, I'm like, it's the word that starts with E and is shaped like
Yes.
this. So
Oh, me too. That's me in many fantasy books where I just kind of blur over the names of people and places and I just go, "Oh, it said such and such." And I'm like, yeah. Okay.
exactly, yeah. It's like, could I tell you the characters in this book? No, but I can show you what their name
I
looks like on the page.
exactly.
That is so fascinating. And I love that too, because like you said, it ties in so beautifully to this this building, and what you slowly discover the building is all about. And just like the name, where if you don't know what it means, you're like, oh, huh, that's cool. As soon as you find out what it means, you're like, oh.
Yes, very much so. I did a writing workshop a few years ago where I was working on this book specifically, and the instructor of it, we were doing a one-on-one afterwards, and she went, I Googled the name of your building and found this other word that's loosely related to it. And I went, yes, that's where it came from. I was so happy she Googled it and found that. I was like, somebody, I don't know. In my mind, I also don't know if that's the kind of thing most readers would Google and find out for themselves. So it's definitely one of those details that doesn't matter if you don't know where it came from, but that I like to think is cool when you do.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and it ties in beautifully because, and this isn't a spoiler, but we open the whole story in a white room getting splattered with
Mhm.
red substance. And so you kind of
Yes.
get clued in really early on that it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies throughout.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
very much. Not a very happy building, all in all.
No, no, it is I think all the gray walls and quiet residence kind
Mhm.
of shield what it is. And can you read us a passage or a quote from your novel?
Yes, I can. So I'm going to read a quote from the first half of the book, roughly. So the quote says, everything the first time around had been imprinted on the building like a tattoo dug into the skin on the back of a wrist, like a Sharpie message pinned into freshly painted drywall, like a pocket knife carved through the door of a bathroom stall. There once and then there forever. So that's one of my favorite lines I wrote in the book. It's dragged its way through many drafts and versions of the book to make it in the end because I just loved it so much.
Oh, and it's
And
so
it's,
beautiful.
and a bit of a indication of maybe some of the what's at work in the building in subtle ways. I don't know.
We'll just have to read it to find out.
Exactly.
Which
Mhm.
readers can do July 16th of this year. Pre-order it. You can pre-order it through Camcat, and just anywhere that sells books can order it
Yep.
in.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Very true.
I like to give a shout out to local bookstores. If you can order it in
Mhm.
there, then you help them out and they help you out, and it's a wonderful symbiotic relationship.
You can order from bookshop.org to do a lot of that also.
Oh, wonderful. Bookshop.org. Okay.
Bookshop.org. It works with indie stores to like you order a book through their website, but then the proceeds go to the indie bookstores, which is very lovely.
Ah, I got a word of a day and a new website to check out. Thank you very
Yes.
much. And do you have any projects coming up?
Oh, nothing that's close enough to definitively speak of, but hopefully in the next couple of years, there will be other things that are also mind-bending and speculative and kind of weirdly written or beautifully written. So lots of work in progress things, but all kind of a far way off.
Perfect. Well, and considering this is your debut, it can only go up from here because this, you've really started with a bang. It is so lovingly and carefully and beautifully crafted, and you should be so proud.
Oh,
It's an absolute triumph.
well, thank you so much.
I adored reading it. And what I'll do is I'll put your website link and your socials link in the description. And is there anywhere else that we can find you online for updates for your upcoming things?
Well, if you go to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter and get all the updates that way too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you, all my listeners and watchers, for joining our chat. If you liked what you heard, please take a minute and rate and follow this podcast or subscribe and like this video. I release videos once a month with no set date. So if you subscribe and follow, then you won't miss anything. However, you wound up here, I hope you are well and living magically.